In today's video, we will go over the issue of restricted areas and especially those located above the versus landing zones and how the developers at Cloud Imperial Games could eventually deal with the matter. Hey everyone and welcome to the channel, it's the Eradicator, and today I want to talk about an issue that has existed for several years at this point in Star Citizen, and here I'm talking about preventing players who go about their business, doing what they do in the game's landing zones, to be annoyed by other players in ships. And I think that we'll all agree here when we say that obviously this shouldn't be happening, mainly because of the chaos that would result in it, but also, given how detailed and filled with props those areas are, it will also severely damage server performances. Not to mention that it is just plain unrealistic, as even today you don't see personal planes flying above big cities or maybe slaloming between residential and business buildings. So it would just make it a living hell for everyone. And so understandably so, we can imagine that in the 30th century, which is when the game is taking place, that there ought to be some restrictions to prevent air traffic, which is obviously far more advanced than today's air traffic, from being a nuisance to locals and visitors alike. And this is something that the developers at Cloud Imperial Games have clearly understood, but seems to have failed to materialize in the game in a convincing way. And yes, there have been attempts to control airspace around landing zones, starting as early as Star Citizen Alpha 3.3.5 and the introduction of Lorville back in the days. We had to deal with a giant bright orange bulb that practically everyone hated. It was obnoxious, stressful, and very resource hungry, which truly meant trouble at the time when the game was far less polished than it is today. Oh, and that blob was also merciless too, meaning that if one tiny bit of a ship went past its edges, the whole vessel would blow up. I'll let you imagine just how often this occurred. Then, the blob was refined and transformed into a web. It was basically the same thing, but more discreet and more resource efficient, but people still despise it for what it was, an attempt at preventing people from causing chaos, which ironically was what they wanted, just not executed like that. Which is why the blobs were eventually replaced by the no less infamous landing splines. At that time, there was already an autopilot that would take over your command of the ship if you ventured too deep into the no-fly zone, but the splines were another of these very visual attempts at taking players by the hand and telling them what to do. And just like the blobs, the spline were quite immersion breaking and rather confusing. Since then, we've had an interface message system that just tells us that, for example, when we fly in a restricted area, and if we don't turn around, our ship will either explode or be taken over by an AI. And just like all of the previous systems, it just doesn't give the players full satisfaction yet. It is therefore obvious that we need a better system, one that will prove more intuitive and fair, while at the same time restricting liberties as little as possible. And the good news is that this is something that the developers at Cloud Imperial Games did say that they were working on. Now, is that new system really going to be better than the current one? Of course, that remains to be seen, but here on the channel we can still talk about it and try to provide some feedback to try to tell the devs what are our expectations, and who knows, perhaps share a few good ideas as well if they are watching the channel or reading the wonderful comments in the comment section down below. In my opinion, I think that we need visual cues that do tell us where we can and where we can't go. I don't think that giving players interface messages is a good idea, because without any visual cue implemented in the game, the game world itself, such a system becomes confusing and leaving one to wonder where the limits are and how far they are going. And to have an idea about how that could look like in the game, I think that just like with many things in Star Citizen, many other game mechanics, the best thing to do is to perhaps have a look at what is being done in the real life, and then see how we could have a gamified version that could possibly fit Star Citizen. Right now, when planes enter an urban area, an air traffic controller tells the pilot where to go, and the pilot is expected to follow the instructions, unless that pilot has some special request to make, like a flyby perhaps, that would normally be allowed under normal circumstances. We know that Cloud Imperial Games are currently working on remaking the game's air traffic controllers, so it could be possible that this is the direction that they are taking, although this is pure speculation on my end here. A multiple choices interface could also be implemented to state our business to the ATC. Do we need to land? Do we need to make a delivery? Or perhaps would we be in transit and on our way to a nearby location? Each of these different answers would then trigger different responses and different access to the landing zone's airspace that would have to be visually represented. And the next question then, of course, is how do we represent these access here and, the places where we can fly and the places where we can't fly. And I think that we need something both discrete while at the same time being visible enough. And perhaps some lights could give some indications. For example, green lights where we could go and red lights where we should not be going. And I think that this is something that we already have in the game. We can already sometimes see some lights on the far side that tell us where the buildings are at night, but I also think that perhaps if we could have some kind of lighting system on the building, quite discreet but that players could eventually be able to spot, and that could perhaps give us some kind of air road or air ale, then that could perhaps be a system that would work. But then, of course, how do we enforce it? That is another question, right? Again, I believe that we will have perhaps to rely on an ATC who would inform us of our misbehavior and maybe tell us that we will be fired upon if we do not comply, and eventually we'll be shot down, or perhaps first be given a big fine and then being warned that we'll be shot and eventually shot. I think that we should have, like this, perhaps a clear, immersive system without being too obnoxious at the same time that would then regulate our traffic in landing zones. But anyway, guys, let me know in the comment section down below what would be your solution to have a more intuitive, immersive experience when it comes to air traffic control above landing zones. Would you like the return of splines, perhaps? Do you think CIG had a good solution in the past, or do you like perhaps the current solution? Let me know in the comment section down below, guys, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel to get a chance to win a Legionnaire thanks to Dr. Fobin. Also, feel free to join our Discord channel. We have a wonderful community there, and another giveaway. It is this time what am I giving away this time? I'm giving away a Eradicator bomber with LTI. All you have to do is to enter our video sharing contest, or if you are a YouTube member or Patreon, you just put in your name and you'll be in. Thank you so much for watching, guys. That is all for today's video. Thank you so much to Dr. Fobin, Captain Steak, Geek Citizen, Eric Olm, and the Digidan. It's the Eradicator, and I will see you guys later.